The next thing that I think is really important to touch on is protein requirements. As you mentioned earlier, you think it's probably sufficient for most people to just pay attention to calories and protein. And for the most part, that's what I do. But though that's largely because, one, I eat at least a pint of ice cream every day, so I get more than enough fat, and I also get, yeah, I get more than enough carbs too. So I'm mainly just worried about protein. But there's a huge variance in recommendation. So the RDA you get from the FDA is far, far lower than most most bodybuilders would really cringe to see the number. If they were forced to eat that amount of protein, they would rebel. But then on the other hand, I was listening to an Iron Culture episode. It was probably many, many months ago, but your guest was suggesting that 1.2 grams per protein, 1.2 grams of protein per pound might really optimize muscle synthesis. So naturally, at this point, we're talking more for a strength athlete, because a typical person like my sister who has no body composition goals whatsoever, they don't need 1.2 grams per pound. But then I've heard other people say 0.67 grams per pound. I think Lane Norton usually says 1 gram per pound. Because I eat so many calories a day, it's not difficult for me to hit 1.2 grams per pound, so that's fine for me. But I had earlier only eaten 1.2 grams of protein per pound when cutting, when you really want to spare you want as much protein as you can have to prevent unnecessary catabolic activity. Sorry. So how do you go about recommending protein for your clients?
I think this is one of those areas where you're going to see very, very different values across different groups, because the question that's asked, the goal of the individual, and the methods used to assess it all vary. So your RDA recommendation is typically based upon nitrogen balance studies and looking at what's the minimum amount of protein, because it's a very costly and hard to get nutrient in countries that have food scarcity and lower socioeconomic status, to prevent malnutrition, right? So nitrogen balance is simply a method where you're measuring the nitrogen output, which can be measured through collected urine samples and estimated losses through sweat and fecal matter. And then you're measuring the nitrogen input. And for those who don't know, the only macronutrient that contains nitrogen is protein. So it's basically just looking at the foods that are consumed and determining the nitrogen content from the protein proportion of the foods that are consumed. And then you can determine whether someone's in a positive or negative nitrogen balance. So 0.8 grams per kilogram is essentially what the general population, on average, most of them need to not be in a negative nitrogen balance chronically and therefore not have malnutrition. It's not necessarily what is available, or what is needed to optimize health.
Sorry, did you say 0.8 grams per kilogram?
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I caught that.
Yeah. So very low.
Very low. I would guess that's like 0.3 something.
It's like pound. 0.35 grams per pound or something like that. Exactly. So yeah, it's like 60 to 80 grams of protein for most people, no problem. If you're a typical omnivore and living in a westernized nation, you're going to accidentally consume more than that without thinking about it. So it's a non-issue in most societies, but it's important to know that that's how that was determined and why and for whom. That is a very different question than what is the amount of protein I need to maximize the rate of muscle gain or strength gain over time. And you don't measure nitrogen balance for that. Oddly enough, you measure increases in muscle mass or strength, right? So, and then you compare different groups on different protein intakes. And when you ask those two different questions in research, you get two very different answers. So I would say the RDA is great for what it is. The minimum amount of protein needed to prevent malnutrition in most people, but not all. However, when we start to look at large or the best, we don't really have large scale studies on protein for performance, but we do have meta-analyses, which I know we're going to talk about later, which is kind of the ad hoc solution to any area of study where we have underpowered research, which absolutely describes sports nutrition and sports science. Most studies were comparing groups of 8 to 15 people versus another 8 to 15 people, and that's almost certainly underpowered in most cases to generalize the population. And to throw another wrench in there, we're often not doing true random sampling. So nonetheless, if we actually want to get an idea of a representative protein intake for the large population, we got to take all those studies together. If they meet similar inclusion criteria for the way they were conducted, put them into a meta-analysis. Now we got 20 studies, so we can be taking a look at 400 people, which is more comparable to like one RCT in medical research, to actually get some estimates here of what's appropriate. So that's been done a number of times. And oftentimes what you're seeing is that you start to get benefits all the way up to roughly double the RDA for increases in strength or protein. So right around 1.5 or 1.6 grams per kilogram, which roughly converts to about 0.7 grams per pound. And there's a considerable amount of uncertainty around that value. Depending upon the statistical paradigm. Like if you look at like the 95% confidence interval, which is just a statistical representation of, okay, this is the mean we found in this meta-analysis. Let's say it was 1.6 grams per kg. But with the level of variability we see in these findings, we have a 95% confidence that the mean of the actual population that we're sampling from falls somewhere between here and here. And that's a huge range. In fact, in a meta-analysis I was part of by Morton and colleagues, it was from 1 gram per kg all the way up to 2.2. So, yeah, but most likely it's probably closer to 1.6, right? But with 95% confidence, with a pretty high degree of statistical confidence, it could be anywhere in there. If we decrease the confidence, like we're 90% confident, then it becomes like 1.4 to 2.0 or something like that. So nonetheless, it's somewhere in that range. And what we decided to recommend in the discussion, based upon two things. One is the fact that a high protein diet seems to be safe, especially within the range we're talking about, like 1.6 gram per kg or slightly higher, and that there is a cost, therefore, to being below what might be optimal, but there's no cost to being above, except maybe preference or cost or farting too much. Important things, right? So we recommended for people interested in optimizing muscle growth, the upper half of that confidence range or that confidence interval. So we recommended 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kg as basically a better safe than sorry range. Also, ranges are good because it provides for individual differences, right? And individual preferences, which is very important. So that range was derived from Morton and colleagues, which I was one of the co-authors on, but there's been multiple meta-analyses since looking at both strength and hypertrophy that have found a similar quote unquote breakpoint. And that's the second thing we did in the Morton meta-analysis. We did what's called a breakpoint analysis, which is just simply looking at, if we look at the plot of gains in strength or gains in lean body mass and the various studies that provided different gram per kilogram recommendations of protein, at what point do we stop seeing a linear-ish relationship and does it start to flatten out? And that was 1.63 grams per kg in the Morton meta-analysis. And in other meta-analyses, it's recently been seen around 1.5. There was one meta-analysis that did a categorical assessment, and the group that was, I believe, 1.59, like 1.3 to 1.59 had slightly poorer gains than 1.6 and up. So it's been found multiple times through multiple meta-analyses for both strength and hypertrophy that probably right around 1.5, 1.6 grams per kg is kind of that point of diminishing returns. And like I said, no downside to being higher. And there are potential circumstances to where you could benefit from being higher. So the range I often recommend is 0.7 to 1 gram per pound for an American audience, or 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kg for a metric audience. Where we don't have a lot of research or sufficient research to be really confident is what happens when you're in a caloric deficit. What happens when you're losing weight? And this was actually what I did my master's on. And unfortunately, we're still lacking a robust data set where we compare like moderate intakes, like in that 1.4 to 1.8 grams per kg intake, which is high for the research, but moderate for what most people in the lifting community consider, to something a lot higher, like over 2 grams per kg. And the little hints we have suggest that it's possible, it hasn't been ruled out, that a higher protein intake could be beneficial while dieting. Maybe just for satiety, maybe just for how it makes you feel, but possibly for performance and weight loss, or sorry, lean body mass maintenance while dieting. But it's not super clear, and it's kind of a better safe than sorry recommendation. But when dieting, because you're dealing with a caloric budget, you don't want to go too high, because it necessarily takes away from carbohydrates and fats, which serve an important function. So when you're dieting and you're tracking calories, you are always robbing Peter to pay Paul to some degree, and that calculus gets more challenging the leaner you get, and the more likely you are to lose lean mass. Because the leaner you get, you have less fat tissue to actually pull from. The more long you've been in an energy deficit, the more likely you're going to get pushed back from your body, be in a poor hormonal environment to maintain muscle mass, et cetera, et cetera. So I wrote a systematic review in 2013 with some of my co-authors where we recommended basically if you use the gram per kg, like 1.8 to 2.7 grams per kg, which seemed to be associated with slightly better muscle retention. But it wasn't a very strong quantitative, there's no meta-analysis on protein intake while dieting yet because there's insufficient data. So right now it's speculative, and it's a better safe than sorry potential benefit. I think that iron culture episode you're referring to, I think that might have been Chris Barakat, and he was talking about body recomposition, if I recall correctly. And he was looking at studies where they had found body recomposition, noting very high protein intakes, but none of those were RCTs. We don't have data suggesting that body recomposition happens better with a very high protein intake. We just have studies on body recomposition, and they happen to be eating a very high protein intake. And there could be a benefit there. It is a little more challenging to convert protein biochemically into energy. You've got to cleave off more of it. It's got to get converted in the liver. And that's why you see a higher dietary thermogenesis value, or what's called DIT, or the thermic effect of food, TEF, of protein. So it costs more calories to convert protein into energy than it does carbohydrates or fat. So there's been people who've postulated that a very high protein diet is a useful way of ensuring you're having sufficient protein to build muscle or maintain muscle, while also, burning a few more calories. But the amount we're talking about is pretty negligible in the grand scheme. And other people have suggested that very high protein diets are more satiating, but on average, we typically see the satiating effect of high protein diets start to drop off around where the diminishing returns of muscle gain drop off, or maybe slightly higher. So generally, my recommendation is like 0.7 to 1.2 grams per pound, and using kind of the lower half for periods where you're not in a deficit, and the higher half when periods where you are in a deficit. But I think it's really important to note, and I recently made an Instagram post about this, that just because we provide a range with a lower limit doesn't mean that lower than that is disastrous. Like if you're at 1.4 grams per kg, all the data would suggest that's sufficient to build decent amounts of muscle. And it would probably be such a small difference to 1.6 or 1.7 or 1.8 grams per kg that you would never notice the difference. So when you start to provide cutoffs for people, they tend to dichotomize the outcomes. But in reality, and it's quite logical if you think about it, if protein overall has a small effect on muscle gain, which it does, if you actually look at the overall effect size of what is a high protein diet have to do with increasing your rate of muscle gain, it has a small effect when we qualitatively assess it, like 0.3 on like a Cohen's or a Hedges G scale, which may not mean anything to the statistically minded, but it means a very small improvement, but it's still notable in the rate of muscle gain. And if you go from a 0.1 or a 0.2 gram per kg difference in protein, which is like 10 to 15 grams, it doesn't all of a sudden drop to now you're losing muscle. It changes to you're gaining slightly less. It operates on a similar continuum. So a very slight change in muscle in protein intake is going to have a very slight change in your potential enhanced muscle gain, even if you fall below the cutoffs that are recommended. And it's important to remember that when you have a bodybuilding sports scientist recommending protein for bodybuilders, that they are looking to optimize things. to the point where even they would not be able to notice the difference, but we have the data to suggest that probably would be better, even if you can't tell. And it's the kind of mentality sports scientists have where someone running a 9.9 100-meter sprint places significantly lower than 9.7. So it's a 0.2 second difference in time, but makes a massive difference of being on the podium or off, just as kind of a random example. And that equivalent exists in every sport at the highest level, where small differences have larger qualitative outcomes. So bodybuilders who are trying to get on stage absolutely shredded with every little ounce of muscle they can, it might make sense to be more picky about your protein intake. But for the average person, if they struggle to get in 1.6 grams per kg and they're regularly getting in 1.4, and I look at their nutrition, I don't flag that as a problem, because it's still plenty sufficient to put on muscle, and they're not trying to be Mr. Ohio, right? They're trying to have a diet that supports their goals, and it absolutely does, And especially if they don't have a lot of extra cash lying around to buy more expensive foods that are protein, especially if maybe they are vegan for whatever reason, if that's the way they want to live their lifestyle, or aligns with their values, and it's very challenging for them to get in a higher protein diet, they can have a lot of confidence that being close to the optimal cutoff is still good, So anyway, that's an important caveat that I think gets lost a lot of the times once you start providing these quantitative guidelines.